Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. This is a DFS preview for the 2021 Sony Open in Hawaii. What I'll be covering in this video, I'll be going over past results, basically looking at the winning score for each tournament from 2013 and on. This way we can either find out, is this a low scoring affair, or do we need to find golfers who are better suited for a grinded out type of golf course? Those that like it closer to par. We'll cover that in past results. We'll also go over historical salaries. Do we need a 6K golfer? How many 10K golfers do we need? That type of thing, which will also kind of go into the optimal lineup, which I'll also be covering for 2018, 2019, and 2020. Again, that is primarily focused on trying to find out how many 6K golfers, how many 10K golfers. Should we go balance? Should we go stars and scrubs? That kind of thing. It's a good way to try to determine how we want to create our lineups. So we'll definitely go over that with the optimal lineup and historical salaries. I will close the video with the bucket system. I would primarily talk about recent form buckets, but we've only had 2 events over the last 8 weeks, and I don't think that's enough events to incorporate recent form. You know, not a lot of golfers actually golfed last week. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think we have like 28, maybe 30 golfers from last week's event in this field, and this is 144 golfers in this field. So yeah, it's definitely not a strong majority coming over from the Tournament of Champions, and prior to that we had 4 weeks off. So again, not really going over recent form. For those of you not familiar with the bucket system, I will link a video right up there right now. You can drill down on that if you want to find out more about the bucket system. Other than that, those are all the items I'm going to cover. You can find timestamps in the description. You can also find those timestamps on the progress bar. It's called chapter mode, and that little red progress bar is going to be cut up into segments. If you're on desktop, all you have to do is hover your mouse over each segment. It'll tell you what that segment's going to cover. If you're on mobile, you just click and drag the little circle up and down the progress bar to find out those segments there. So let's go ahead and get into the spreadsheet. Okay, so we are looking at past results now from 2013 to 2020. You can see all of them up on the screen right now. Obviously 2013 to 2020. One glaring thing that actually shows up for me, and I'm sure you guys have noticed it, is 2020 was the highest scoring. Highest, again, in golf is opposite. So lowest would be the more negative we can go. This was definitely the highest score that we've seen since 2013 by at least 6 strokes. We have a 17 under in 2014. We also have a 17 under in 2018. Other than that, we are floating around 20 under. 22 in 2019, 20 in 2016, 23 in 2015, 24 in 2013, 27 in 2017. I'm anticipating we're going to see similar scores to what we've seen at the Tournament of Champions. I think we're going to find something around 24 under being the winning score. So for those researching, you know, if you have the opportunity to filter out your tournament results by resort style course or any notorious, you know, really low scoring events, I would definitely do that and try to find which golfers, you know, correlate to success that way. I would definitely not try to take a grinded out golfer in this type of event. I think we're going to see low scores, and that's just been the trend since the restart, basically, since June of last year. Golfers without crowds are just going so much lower than they typically have. I want to say scoring averages are, you know, in comparison to the average of each event, I think they're going much lower, like 2 or 3 shots lower. I'd have to do more research into that, but I believe that that's true. So definitely, I think we're going to see something around, I'm going to say like 21 to 24 under. I said 21 under at the Tournament of Champions, ended up being 25, so I kind of was a little off, but basically in the same ballpark. I think we're going to find scores around there. So again, I bring all of it up to basically tell you guys to find golfers that can score really low or that have been known to do so. I think you will find success building lineups that way. All right, let's talk about historical salaries. Now, I added a little piece here, kind of added a little analysis box, but I also, I forget where I added it. I think I added it over to the side. I basically did a count. I mean, obviously, if you can see the formula and you're familiar with this, it shows all the salaries from 12K down and what the count is in each of those ranges. Well, then I also totaled those up, again, using kind of a sum function over here. You can see which ones I've included. So 10K and above is in this range right here. And what this entails, what this basically does, first of all, we can see, let's see, what is this doing? Okay. I was wondering where I did that. Okay, so the top 10 percentage for this bucket. So of 15 golfers, 10K and above, 4 of them finish in the top 10. That equals out to be 26.67%. So 26.67 of this range has appeared inside the top 10 over the last 3 years, meaning it is probably beneficial to actually go for someone who's 10K and above. And obviously you can see the rest of this reads the same way. 17 divided by 1, you're going to get 5.8. The percentages here are just divided into themselves. So when we look at the top 10, this is just comparing the top 10 to itself. 11.3% of it falls under the 10K range. 2.86% falls under 9 to 10. 14.29 falls between 8 and 9. 42% falls in that 7 to 8K range. That's 15 golfers fall under there. And then 28% falls under 7K. So you have a majority here, 71.43%, 8K and below. And I should say it's 7.9K and below. It's not 8. It's not including 8. So definitely finding golfers who are low priced, very beneficial here. And it looks like between 7 and 7.9 is the range you really want to hammer. Obviously, you can see the totals here. I mean, the below 7K range just dwarfs any of the other ranges. It's not necessarily double that of the 7 to 8K range, but when you compare the rest of these, like all of the golfers here from 8 to 10K equal out to be 63. 63 golfers had an 8K and above salary in the years 2018, 2019, 2020. That seems ridiculous. And of them, all of those prices, nearly 50%. I'm sorry. We can't look at it that way. We would have to look at it up here and look at 28.57% of golfers in this range. So that ends up being 10 out of 63 finish inside the top 10. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about this. You can chime in down in the comment section, but that doesn't make me feel particularly confident in playing anyone in that 8K and above range. Now, usually I think it's kind of fool's gold to, look at something like this and say, I can't play someone in the 10K range. But I do want to say, it definitely favors, I shouldn't say favors. I would be, looking at this, I would be more comfortable doing a stars and scrubs lineup. Because if we're not seeing a large, number of golfers inside the top 10 in those ranges, means basically, why not kind of limit your exposure to 8K and above and just grab 2 and then everyone else 7, 9 and below. Again, that's just running out the percentages. Every tournament is different, and it's not like we're gonna, always repeat everything every year. If that was the case, then this wouldn't be gambling. You wouldn't be gambling on certain players. The one other thing I want you to note is looking at the winner's salaries over the last 3 years, no one has been more than 8,500. And when we look at second place, no one was more than 7,600. So that kind of also backs that type of reasoning of maybe just hammering down, like 7K and below, or 8K and below. Obviously 2 8.5s show up here, so it'd be kind of silly not to include them. But yeah, inside the top 4 of every year, there is a 10K and above golfer. So it would be probably beneficial to do so, to play a 10K golfer. Now, typically when I come here, right away I'm talking about, the average salary of this tournament. If you remember last week, it was $9,100. Now it's $77, which is pretty low. So all this is saying is, of all the salaries that were top 10 over the last 3 years, the average of them ends up being $7,700. When we look at DraftKings and how much salary they give us $8,300 a player. That's what the average salary you can spend on a player is. 6 positions, $50,000 salary that you get to use. That ends up equaling out to be 8.333, repeating, of what you can spend for your DraftKings lineups. Obviously, this is $600 lower than that, meaning you don't need to spend all of your $50,000 on the lineup. If you were with me in the review during the Tournament of Champions, I kind of said that that's also a silly way of thinking, a silly way of... it's silly logic, basically, because most tournaments, and what we as in Chad Eckert from the Fantasy Golf Pod and I, what we've done when we do a few of these reviews is talk about how crazy it is that most GPPs are always won by someone who either has 50,000 flat that they've used for their golfers, or 49.9 or 49.8. Very rarely does anyone win a GPP with less than that. Like, I've never really seen anyone have like a $48,000 salary that they used and they left 2,000 on the table, or over 1,000 basically. Like, I've never really seen that. So I would say don't worry about salary, but if there was ever a week to do it, I think this would be the week, because obviously you can see average salary is a little bit lower inside the top 10 than the DraftKings scoring. You can obviously see the minimum salary inside the top 10 was $6,100, so nearly stone min. 76 was the minimum for the winner. I guess I don't really need to talk about the winner. You can see all of the winners' salaries here. The most expensive was 11.1, and that ends up being Webb Simpson's salary for this year. So basically all of this, what it tells me, we're going to find most of our finishers probably 7-9 and below inside the top 10. It's going to really put a precedence on finding the correct golfers 8K and above. Obviously that kind of goes every week, but I don't think I'm going to do a balanced lineup. I'll figure out some kind of percentage of how many of my lineups do I want to be completely balanced. And I think if I was doing 50, I right away want to allocate just 5 to a balanced build. Otherwise, the rest of them are going to be stars and scrubs. So you guys can take whatever you want from this. I think I did a pretty decent job explaining how the numbers are what they are. Again, this reads here, these percentages here, of this range, 26% of all of the golfers from 2018 to 2020 inside that 10K and above range finished inside the top 10. That's how that reads, and again, goes down. So the safest range, you could say, is 10K and above. Find a golfer 10K and above that you like. Maybe not multiple ones, but maybe. Over the last 3 years, we saw 4. That means it's over 1 per year. Obviously, 11.1 was 10th place in 2019. That's not very good. But at least 1 has been inside the top 10. I think that's what I'll end up doing. And I'm probably going to get bold with my lineups. I probably will leave some money on the table. which will lead me to the optimal lineup. Now, the reason I talk about this, I'm always trying to search for the optimal lineup. So when we look at the optimal lineup, say for 2020, you can see like the little black tick marks here that say optimal lineup. Those were the golfers in the optimal lineup. Now, last year it equaled out to be 612. The winning GPP score was 549. Again, last year the winner was at 11 under. And obviously that was a tie, went into a playoff, I believe, right? Yeah, with Brendan Steele. So 2 golfers finished at 11 under. You're not going to have a high scoring, round. We had 798 at the Tournament Champions this last week in DraftKings. 549 is a considerable discount. But you can see between the $1 GPP winning lineup, 549, and the optimal, 612, there was a huge gap in between of what you could have done. Again, the GPP winning lineup used all $50,000 of their salary to create their lineups, and they had Cameron Smith, Kevin Kisner, Graham McDowell, Lonto Griffin, Corey Connors, Sungjae Im, and that's it. That was 6? Yeah, that was 6. And your optimal was Cam Smith, Brendan Steele, Webb Simpson, Ryan Palmer, Graham McDowell, Lonto Griffin. Obviously, pay attention, 6'8", 6'4", of course. 2 6K golfers. We have a 7'5", a 7'5". Again, 2 more golfers that were below 7'9". So I guess let's do a running total of that. That's 4 in the optimal lineup that were under that 7.9K price range. And then obviously 8.5 and 11.1. Again, Webb Simpson, that same price this year. I do like Webb Simpson. I think that's good. Let's look at 2019. Okay, good. I was worried I didn't have the total points. I don't have the total points for the optimal lineup. So in 2019, again, $50,000 was used to win the GPP winning lineup. They ended up using Matt Kuchar, Andrew Putnam, Ches Reavie, Justin Thomas, Brandt Snedeker, and Keith Mitchell. Now let's look at that too, because that's very interesting. 11.4. So that was your really high price guy. So they went with the highest price guy. Then they went to Matt Kuchar, who was 8.5, Brandt Snedeker, who was 8.2. 3 golfers right there, 8K and above. Then they followed it up with 3 other golfers that were 7, 6, and below. So again, that narrative now is becoming more prevalent. The winning GPP lineup had 3 golfers, 7, 9, and below. I think we're still going to have to find that, and that's another lineup that has a 6K golfer in it. I do believe we need to get to the 6K range, but as we look at the optimal lineup, now I didn't include points with this, so I could be a little off on this. So Davis Love III may not have been the optimal lineup. Usually what I was doing in 2019 and before was just looking at finishing place and trying to find the most golfers you can fit, 1 through 6 is as close as possible if you could, and then putting them into salary. So obviously those golfers together, that equals $47,300, leaving $2,700 on the table. And if that was the case, you basically had, you had 4 golfers that would have been 7, 9, and below, an 8.5 and a 10.5, which looks eerily similar to this year. We had an 8.5 and an 11.1. So the only difference is instead of 11.1, we go to 10.5. But we basically had the same range of golfers in 2019 as we did in 2020 that were under the optimal lineup. Now, when we go to 2018 and we look, I don't have the winning GPP lineup, unfortunately. The top 6 guys, like I said, what I did, 2019 and earlier was just look at finishing positions. Any one of these golfers could have outscored any of these, and they would have been the optimal lineup. So if you do have those numbers, cross-check it against mine, and just look. But obviously, if we look at all the salaries from everyone 10K or in 10th place and above, within the top 10, sorry, that was difficult to say, we have one guy 10.6, one guy 9.3, one guy 8.3, and everybody else is 7-9 and below. So again, that is a range that we probably need to hammer. We only have one golfer in the 6K range. So, you know, maybe 6K isn't as necessary as we probably think it needs to be. You know, if Justin Thomas ends up being in the optimal lineup and you needed him with Ryan Blom and then these three golfers and, you know, who knows, maybe 7, 8. I don't know exactly. But if that ends up being optimal lineup, obviously you would need someone in the 6-7 or in the 6K range. Other than that, it doesn't look like you need to. But again, we only had one golfer. I'm sorry, 2 golfers. We had 2 golfers, 8K and above. So again, let that sink in. We only had 2 golfers, 8K and above. That would have been what it looks like the optimal lineup in 2018. So combine that with the historical salaries. I'm probably going to start very high at the top price, you know, which is Webb Simpson. We can go ahead and look at that right now. Webb is at 11-1. You know, English is a good candidate, although he won last week. I don't think he's going to be fatigued. As you know, I think there's going to be some fatigue, but I still think he's going to be a solid golfer. I don't think he's going to take this tournament for granted. Now, obviously, definitely want to keep in mind there is a withdrawal possibility. He's won. He's locked up his card for an additional 2 years. So, because obviously I think he get a 1-year exemption for being inside the top 30 at the end of the year. So he already has a year exemption. You add the 2 on for winning. He's got the next 3 years set. He doesn't necessarily need to play this tournament, but since he's already in Hawaii, why not? Maybe. I don't know. But keep your eyes and ears obviously looking and listening to a Harris English withdraw. But Colin Morikawa, I like. Joaquin Niemann, obviously I don't mind. Hideki's probably going to be one of the bigger fades amongst a lot of people. I'm probably leaning that way too, but I'm not going to avoid playing him altogether. He did look really bad at the Tournament of Champions, but I don't know. I don't think it's that detrimental to play him. I definitely won't put him in any of my high priced tournaments. That's for sure. Like my high entry fees won't happen. Daniel Berger looks good, but then I think, you know, finding 1 or 2 more golfers, you know, from 8K and above is going to be what I'm going to do. We'll see. I'm going to toy around with having 2 guys from 8K and above in my lineup with a bunch of guys underneath 8K. I will also definitely, like I said, I'll like 5 out of 50 lineups will definitely be as balanced as I possibly can make it within reason that makes sense. I'll also include, you know, some lineups where I'll go like 10-4, 9-8, 8-8, and then go down to the bottom. I don't have an issue with doing that either. I'm not afraid of the 6K range. It's really weird hearing some people talk about the 6K range as like you need to avoid some of these golfers. Some of these guys are decent golfers. Doug Gim, decent golfer. Malnati, decent golfer. Austin Cook, decent golfer. We could go on. Hudson Swafford just won. You know, obviously it was a resort style course, but he did just win. Now, here's the one thing I will say. As I scroll through, let me go ahead and put a filter or a freeze here just so we can go through this a little bit easier. When we look at official World Golf Ranking, and don't mind this, the spreadsheet isn't fully populated just yet. It will be before the next video. I would say this. We have a lot of high-priced, or not high-priced, but a lot of golfers inside the top 100. And if I were to sort this by official World Golf Ranking, we have exactly 34 golfers inside the top 100. Now, strength of field, believe it or not, well, I think you probably already do know this, but it does go off of official World Golf Ranking. And at first, it counts how many golfers are inside the top 200, which ends up being 71 golfers. So nearly half of the field will be 200 or better. And this actually could be a little wrong because they use the end of 2020's official World Golf ranking. So if anyone falls outside of it, they would still use that golfer as, you know, someone who was in the top 200 at the beginning of the year. But then what they'll do is they'll count how many golfers are inside the top 30 in the world, also at an event, and they will add points to this. Basically, I think this is the highest strength of field we've had at this event in a long time. I do have official World Golf ranking recorded for last year. I almost thought this was all sorted by this. And what I can tell you for last year, we only had 6 golfers that were inside the top 30. Again, comparing that to this year, 13, so double. And if we look at the top 200, looks like it's going to be around the same. Like, that's a lot. 65. So nearly the same, but definitely more top 30 golfers. So the strength of field definitely will be a little stronger for the 2021 season as opposed to the 2020 season. So keep that in mind. I just found out that piece of information when I was visiting the official World Golf ranking. I wanted to know how they determine what strength of field is. I'm interested when it comes to building my database, how to put fantasy points together. Also, I want to record the strength of field during those events because that's going to be another thing, you know, to basically query from, to filter off of. So wanted to mention that. So obviously a few more top 30 golfers in this field, meaning it's going to be a little tougher. And perhaps maybe we'll actually see a couple more, you know, 9K, 8K and above golfers inside the top 10 compared to other years. So keep that in mind. Okay, last thing we're going to cover. I can't believe it's been 26 minutes in this video already. I feel like I've been cruising through this. Is the bucket system. Now I have the bucket system table on here. The last time I talked about this could have been the Tour Champ. Oh no, it would have been Masters. Well, also RSM Classic. What am I thinking of? Or Mayakoba Golf Classic. We did talk about it there. I don't think we actually had a last week bucket to discuss. We really don't have one this week either. We do, but we don't. So let's go over what this is really briefly. I record top 5, top 10 finish positions, and then what their finishing positions were the year before and the week before. So quickly, in 2020, we had 0 golfers finish inside the top 5 that had a finishing position at this tournament last year, or the year before, I should say, inside the top 20. And a good way to check that out, I'll go to the 2020 recent form tab. We look at all the golfers in the top 5. We look at their last year finishing position. 0 of them finished inside the top 20. Therefore, we have a 0 right here. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Obviously, last week, we're just looking at the week prior. And the interesting bit with this tournament, the Sony Open, is it's always followed the Tournament of Champions, which is a very limited field, usually only 30 golfers finish inside, well, not finish, but play in that tournament. And when we look at that, we'll just go to the top 10. We can look at actually let's look at top 5. Because it's a really interesting tidbit here. So when we look at these buckets, the same thing applies. So in 2020, we had 2 golfers who finished top 20 the week before. So if we go back to 2020 and we look at, you know, obviously this is your top 5, 1st through 4th. When we look at the Tournament Champions the week before, this column here, we have 2 golfers that finished inside the top 20. And I do that for every single year, and you can see all of those things populated here. Now, you see absolutely 0 zeros. There are no zeros within those ranges, meaning golfers who have placed top 20 the year before, or the week before, at this tournament have done relatively successful. We've had a total of 17 golfers who finished inside the top 10 who had a finishing position top 20 the week before. That is 37% of the bucket. Well, I'm sorry. that would be 37% of all golfers who finish inside the top 5 had a last week bucket score within this range, 1 to 20. So it would be last week 2. That's what their bucket range would be. You can see, obviously, the majority of them would have fallen on this, did not play. Again, it's a limited field. We have 140 golfers. If typically we only have 30-some golfers playing in the Tournament Champions, that means 110 of them are not going to be playing the week before. Obviously, do the math. You're going to have, a higher chance to find golfers finish inside the top 5 or the top 10, because obviously that's what I do here. And these are the numbers I end up going by when discussing the bucket scores. We look at the top 10. We're going to see more golfers in these ranges here, primarily because the majority of golfers fall under that range. Here's one piece I added. This column over here, which I call the range percentage. I don't know what else to call it, but what I'm doing here is we're looking at this number, the total of all finishes inside the top 10, of their bucket score. So that range 1 to 20 from the week before. 24 I am dividing into, finally, I've created this. So I know a lot of people were kind of asking for this. This is a count of every single tournament with all of the golfers who qualify for those buckets. So I can explain that really quickly as well. This year, we have 17 golfers who finished inside the top 20 last year. So when we go to 2021, let's put a filter on this. I don't have a filter. Let's create one. So we slap a filter on this. I'm not going to name it right now. It's fine. But we sort from last year and we look at all the top 20 finishes and we do a little count here, and it ends up being 17. So again, if we go over here, and obviously you guys can pause that and count it yourself, we have 17 golfers finishing inside the top 20 the year before. So you can see that happens. And I did that again for every single year. In fact, actually, no, what I did is I'm using those recent form pages and doing a count if function off of that. So for last week range, when we look at this year, we would have 12 that finished inside the top 20 from last week, and we have 12. Again, count them up. So I tallied all of those, did a total over here. You can see what that percentage is in comparison to the rest of the field. So nearly 85% of our golfers every single year didn't play the week before. And that obviously makes sense. But 85%, 973 golfers, that's a lot. Obviously, you can see the same thing applies for last year. I have looked at all these numbers. They are 100% correct. So I am not at all concerned that any of these numbers are off. By the way, these totals do not include 2021. It wouldn't make sense, because what I'm doing with these percentages is I'm dividing the number you see inside the top 10 for that bucket range by the range of totals that we have. So then you get a percentage. And how that would read then is that 17.69% of last year twos finish inside the top 10. This is a number a lot of people have been asking for, because obviously this number here is high. Like, pretend we don't have this information. This is what we were going off of. Now, 35% of all top 10 golfers fell under this bucket, the last year ones. Likewise, 71.29% fell under this bucket. So when I'm telling you, hey, we want to play last week ones for sure. We want at least, 7 golfers in our lineup that are last week ones. Likewise, for last year golfers, we want to either go last year 2 or last year 1, which is obviously did not play. Together, those ranges equaled 65.17% of all top 10s. Like all of those look good, but you really don't have that missing piece of the overall. We're looking at totals. So now when we see 35.96, that only ends up being 7.5% of all did not plays finished inside the top 10. That is not nearly as high as this range. And although this number is higher, you would find better success, not success, I shouldn't even say that. There's a higher amount of golfers who fall under this range that have finished inside the top 10. So you would have better success picking a golfer, I should say. If you were just to blindly pick, you'd have a better shot to find someone in that range than you would in this range. And likewise, this would tell you also you would have better success picking golfers out of this range. Same goes with down here. I mean, look, obviously 71% of top 10 golfers were last week ones. That's pretty high. But when you compare it to the total amount of golfers that fall under that bucket, only 7.4% fall under the top 10. 22.86% who finished top 20 the week before of all golfers finished inside the top 10. You have a higher percent rate to find a top 10 golfer digging around in this bucket than you would in the last year one bucket or the last week one bucket. Again, 973, much higher than 105. 973, I should say 72 divided by 973, 7.4%. So I know a buddy of mine was asking for this. Is like, yeah, but you know what would be great is if we could actually see how many golfers that's out of. You know, obviously this is good. This is just discussing just the top 10 scores or the top 10 finishers and what their buckets are and whatever. Like that all makes sense to me. I get it. But it doesn't really give me the full picture. Now we have the full picture. And hopefully that wasn't too wordy and long. But either way, we basically want to target last year ones, last year twos, you know, these two ranges here. So golfers who finished top 20 last year and golfers who just didn't play. We want to be looking at those ranges because we're going to find a pretty high amount of success in picking out golfers that way. When it comes to last week, the easiest one by far is to find a golfer who finished top 20 last week. So right away, my inclining is why not find a golfer who finished top 20 last year as well as top 20 last week? Like right away, that just makes sense to me, right? I also record all of the bucket combinations. So when we look down at the percentages here, I can see, again, we're doing a count of all top fives, all top tens, what makes sense. And of all top, I should say of all two twos. That's the other thing I'm going to get to. I'm going to actually do that same total that I did for just the bucket tables that you see. I'll do that for the bucket combinations. But of top 10s, 6.74% of them were 2-2s. Last year 2, last week 2. Not a high percentage, but obviously not a low percentage. Your best bet is a 1-1 or a 2-1. That ends up being 48% of the top 10 golfers. It also ends up being 38% of top 5 golfers. So you would definitely find a better suitor there. But the thing is, again, if we're using last week ones, we are, we're trying to get something that might be very elusive. So what we can do is look at all of our top 1-1s. So, and this might be very easy to pick out. So if we look at all of our top 1-1s, our top priced golfer is Erik van Rooyen. I'd have to look more into the stats to see if I like that or not. Right away, I don't know. I'm not leaning one way or another. I do like him in general, but I don't know if I like him at this golf course. Then we go down to 7.6, and really all we have are 7 golfers, 7K and above. Everyone else is in that 6K range. So my first thought is if we're going by 1-1s, I'd want to find a golfer who has the best course history. And we'll do this in the strategy video. I'm not going to go over this right now. I will show you if you don't care to, continue on. Here are your course histories. So of all 1-1s, Brendan Grace is your best 1-1, followed by Austin Cook. And I do like Austin Cook. This is probably just one finish apiece between those two. Same with DJ Trahan. I don't know what the field average is yet. I haven't calculated that, but you can see the colors start to get a little bit darker going towards the red section, meaning that's probably, if I were to guess, field average is going to be around 49 just by how the coloring goes. The majority of our golfers are down here. And we have 8 golfers. Jim Furyk probably has played this tournament before, just it was prior to 2013, which I don't have stats for. And you can see some of the other golfers. Hunter Mann, again, he probably has played here before. Same with Nick Watney. It's up to you guys. You know, one golfer that is, you know, top 60, top 55, whatever you want to call it, in this range here that did not play. And that's another thing you could go by is official World Golf Ranking. Obviously, Van Rooyen is your top guy, Ryo Ishikawa, Siwoo Kim. So, again, when we look at this 1-1, it is going to be difficult. I'm trying to find an analogy of like an impossible. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. There we go. That's basically what we're going to be doing with the 1-1s, is trying to find that needle. And again, you don't have to find a 1-1. It is the highest. We're going to find a 1. There will be a 1-1 inside the top 10. I almost want to guarantee it. I feel like there's going to be. There has been every single year. I mean, that's what this little table is. When you see 7 out of 7, that means out of the last 7 years, there were 7 1-1s inside the top 10. Likewise, there were 7 2-1s inside the top 10. And maybe a 2-1 is probably a better way to look at it, because those are golfers who finished top 20 here last year but didn't play last week. There's less of them. Should probably just get rid of Hideki, but there are less. And again, your high-priced guy is going to be Charles Hall III. And then it goes down just like the 1-1s did. But again, there are less. Now, how does that compare? I don't know, because I don't know how many 2-1s there were last year in comparison to this year. We'll get to that eventually. Again, over here, I'll do the total combinations per year. I will get to that eventually. But it does show up quite a bit. And especially when we just look at our raw bucket numbers, you know, last year 2, last week 2. I should actually scroll over here. There we go. You know, finding a last year 2, it's a pretty good. You'll have a pretty good chance of finding someone inside the top 10, if not maybe 2 golfers inside the top 10. You know, we've only seen one time it happened in 2020. Otherwise, we've seen it happen more than twice. And I mean, if we're averaging this out, which I should actually add over here, that ends up being 3.71. So 3.71 last year 2's average inside the top 10 at the Sony Open. When we look at this, are we comfortable with seeing these golfers and thinking 2 to 3 or 3.7 of these golfers are going to finish inside the top 10? I will tell you this. It gives me more confidence to play someone like a Peter Malnati or a Henrik Norlander or even a Brendan Steele. Everyone will be on Cam Davis, but this is probably chalk you don't eat, or chalk you don't fade. You eat this chalk. But I also don't mind any of these golfers either. I mean, I relatively don't like playing Brandt Snedeker, but you can if you want. But that's another way to look at this. So we looked at 1-1s, we looked at 2-1s. Let's look at another. 2-2s were another one that I was thinking about. So let's go ahead and look at those. I think it's even smaller yet. Yep, it sure is. Webb Simpson, Ryan Palmer, Lonto Griffin. So if we wanted to find a total, maybe that's why last year 2, last week 2s are so low inside the top 10 count. You know, we only had 6 of them over the last 7 years. That equals 6.74% of all top 10 bucket combinations. Maybe that's why it's so low, is that there aren't a lot. So maybe it sets us up for a little bit of, I don't want to call it heartache, but maybe disappointment. Like, of these 3 golfers, you know, do we pick one and just stick to it? You know, Ryan Palmer didn't have a very good Sunday, but he's still a very good golfer. Do we go with Webb Simpson? Do we go with Lonto Griffin? He's over 7K or he's over 6.9K. Do we play him then? I'm going to put my money on Webb. I know he's the favorite, obviously. 8th ranked golfer in the world. Ryan Palmer's no slouch, but I don't mind Webb. And I liked what he was doing towards the end of the Tournament of Champions. Didn't really start out that strong. Did have a good Friday. And then just kept it even keel, basically, throughout the rest of the 2 rounds. So I do like Webb. I think Webb would be a good choice. The rest of them, though, I mean, basically, we want to be looking at last week ones, right? So we'll go 3, 4, 5, 6, and just look at all of these golfers. Our highest price guy is Russell Henley, 8.7. Zach Johnson, 8.5. We're probably going to find a lot of success somewhere here. And maybe we find it here in this 7, 9, and below range. It's really weird to see 5s being some of these golfers, because if we do look at their buckets, if we look at last year bucket 5s, that would be golfers who finished 20 to 40th last year. And I think the only reason that this is a last year 5 is just, it's out of chance. I mean, all it needs is for 0 of these to happen this year and 4 of these to happen this year. This will bump this up to the number 3 bucket. So it just shows you, like, all of these buckets are really close to each other except for the last year 6. When I see red, usually I kind of run away. I don't want to play anyone that is, this last year 5 bucket, but I don't think we're going to have an issue. And I believe if we look at the bucket combinations, we do see some last year 5s. So 2 out of 7 years, we've seen it 4 times. Nothing to be afraid of using. So with that being said, we'll cover more of this bucket system during the strategy video. I mean, I'm not going to discuss it in full like I did, but I will say, okay, what we talked about in the preview is I want to grab X amount of golfers from this bucket. I'm going to provide percentages like this. I want to use these percentages to my advantage. But I think when it comes down to it, the raw numbers themselves are going to matter more than these percentages. This is just kind of giving you a bit more confidence as to what you should play. But the big elephant in the room is you can't ignore the high volume of golfers that finish in this bucket. Yeah, again, it's going to be finding a needle in a haystack, but we're going to need to find a considerable amount of golfers that are under this bucket. Likewise, same thing applies for this one. 7 is your minimum for last week ones inside the top 10. 7. It's ridiculous. Looking at 2018, this is all your top 10. So obviously 13 places. Each one of these that are blank are your last week ones. So there are a lot. And for that, let's say 3, 8, 10. You have 10 in 2018. That's going to be pretty standard. Obviously, we had a very limited field last week, so we're not going to have a lot of finishing positions. But you can feel confident that of the 30 golfers that did golf last week, you want to target golfers in that 1 to 20 range and go from there. I mean, your average here is what? 3 on the button. 3 golfers. Last week 2s. You could put in your lineup. Obviously, I'm going to fluctuate between 2 and 4, most likely. Obviously, 1 is the minimum. But golfers who finished top 20 last week, it's a good way to start your lineups. Just start there. Follow the last year bucket, logic that goes with it. I think it's going to be just fine. So we'll come back to this in the strategy video, but this has been probably 20 minutes longer than I wanted it to, but a lot of good information. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. So I'll leave you at that. Thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you in a CourseFit video either later tonight or tomorrow morning. All right, bye.